Yeah, absolutely. We're talking 60 million.
Okay, wow.
And you can't see anything. You can't see anything. A cash flow for basically 5 years.
Wow.
So it's not for the faint-hearted. But that's the scale. That's the scale we did it on. Within 5-6 years, we were profitable, and now we're reinvesting now, so that changes things for a few years. But we're a very profitable business, and going forward, I mean, that's the thing. My parents have put Craggy Range in a 1,000-year trust, so it's never to be sold.
Hello and welcome to Trillions. I'm your host, Alyse Grace, and today I'm chatting with Mary-Jeanne Hutchinson, otherwise known as MJ. MJ is the daughter of billionaire Terry Peabody and the director of family-owned Craggy Range Winery, one of the top 50 wineries in the world. MJ visits the best restaurants around the globe selling her family's wine. In 2012, they entered into a partnership with the Rothschild family to produce a special wine called Rimapere. MJ explains why the wine business is not for the faint-hearted and discusses women in business, plus teaches us some interesting facts about winemaking. This episode of Trillions is sponsored by Xenox Diamonds. Mention my name or the Trillions podcast and they will give you a free upgrade to platinum with any engagement or wedding ring purchase. Find them on Queen Street in Brisbane or order online.
Mary-Jeanne, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So your name is Mary-Jeanne Hutchinson, but for the sake of keeping the conversation flowing, I'll call you MJ, if that's okay.
That's what most people call me now.
Perfect. All right. Well, let's get straight into it. So there's a classic story that you, back in 1993, sat down with your parents and had a conversation about starting a new business. Can you give us a bit of an insight into what that lovely dinner was with your parents and what was the outcome of the conversation?
I actually think it was more around 1991, but anyway, we won't change history. My dad manufacturing, waste management, recycling products, which is great, but wasn't that female friendly. And Mum and I had a background in events, and my mum had in the many years ago, or in that time, the Fountain Room restaurant in the cultural centre, and I don't know if you're too young to remember, but somewhere. So hospitality certainly wasn't too far from our background, and we wanted a business we could all be involved in. And whilst his were very worthwhile businesses, they just weren't for us. So we did come up. He tells the story that he was wined and dined and gently cajoled. I think he was basically nagged senselessly. The poor man had a long trip away, and we did prepare him dinner, and we both love to cook. And by the end of the dinner, convinced him that we should go into the wine business. I, at that time, pictured I was getting married, starting a family. I was studying, or then started studying wine marketing from Roseworthy, which is now University of Adelaide. I pictured a hobby farm down in the Yarra Valley or something like that, a small thing that we could just be proud of the wines that we made, but not too onerous. So he woke up, he says, with a hangover and a promise to the two ladies that he couldn't break. And I do often wonder who can you break? What ladies do you break promises to? But regardless of that, we decided to go into the wine business. So I went on with getting married and starting a family, and Mum and Dad started looking around the world for an established winery at that time. They thought that they would buy a winery, and within a few years... Pardon?
It takes a lot to start a winery, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. But within a couple of years, whether it be, and they went to the obvious beautiful parts of the world, Burgundy, Bordeaux, the Napa, they're originally American, Margaret River in Australia. Wow. But within a few years, a couple of years, they realised that they didn't want to buy somebody else's winery. They didn't want to inherit the issues that might be around the winery, or that was more from my mother's perspective, as she is a perfectionist. And from my father's, the ones that they would have loved, that there would never be a return on investment. And he really did, this isn't a folly, it had to stack up financially. So then we started looking for land to start from scratch, and Western Australia, Margaret River was very appealing. But we came upon New Zealand through a few, my father's truck manufacturing importer at the time. Trucks stopped at, my dad had Western Star trucks, also own Montana Wines. And my father was in New Zealand for a trucking exhibition, and the head of Montana Wine said, you should really, who knew that Dad was interested, you really should have a look around New Zealand. There's still extraordinary land available. And Dad went to visit Kumeu River, which is on the edge of Auckland, and makes still a family-owned winery that we work with, the Brakoviches. They make exceptional Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs. And the thought was, if we're making exceptional wines so close to a major city, there's still great opportunity here. So we started looking, and at that same time, my dad, his bank in the UK was the Rothschild Bank, and he was at lunch with Baron Eric Rothschild, which is always a great name to throw around. But he said to Dad, New Zealand's the future. You should look at New Zealand. And we actually have ended up in a joint venture with them in New Zealand over the years too, where we make wine for the Rothschilds. We have made Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Noir that they're very Bordeaux based, so they don't produce those grape varieties, and they just have distributed those for several years in Europe. So there were two factors that took us to New Zealand. And when we did go there, we were blown away by the fruit quality. It was still early days outside of Sauvignon Blanc, as you're familiar with, but the fruit quality, and Martinborough, one of the places that we have our main land holdings, the fruit quality of the Pinot Noir, and the reputation of the Pinot Noirs from Martinborough even then so outweighed their production. You know, they made tiny volumes, but they were so known on the world stage of Pinot Noir. So it's been extraordinary that we were able to buy land from scratch and plant and develop our own winery. A long-term vision, though. It's certainly not a hobby farm. Yeah,
so it takes quite a while to get established by the sound. So your dad, Terry, went in search of the best location from all around the world. So that says something about your winery in New Zealand, that you searched France and you searched all these other incredible wine regions, and that you settled for New Zealand. So that's incredible. And then so then you plant grapes essentially. How do you choose what grapes to plant, and how
we went? Sorry.
It's okay. No, I was just wondering, how, to get a visual of how it. So you buy a block of land. Do you have to flatten it? Like, what happens then with the grapes and all that kind of stuff?
You really try not to flatten it. Just you want the natural. So you buy a piece of land, but you buy a piece of land that you know you want to grow grapes on. And we went more the old world, which was plant the grapes that are appropriate for the site, and we've gone into different regions. So our cooler climate wines that you've enjoyed, the Sauvignon Blanc, we've planted in Martinborough predominantly, and we keep coming back to Martinborough. We weren't tied to any region anywhere in the world, but also in New Zealand when we went, we weren't tied to any region. So we have planted different grape varieties in different parts of New Zealand, but we keep coming back to our two main areas. But I'll explain that a bit better. So we knew in Martinborough, or had great faith in Martinborough, that Sauvignon Blanc would do well and Pinot Noir would do well. So on our lower terrace, which is younger soils, we planted Sauvignon Blanc. On the top terrace, and they're naturally two different terraces, we planted Pinot Noir. And within that, some small parcels of trials, and we'll always do trials of, we have Riesling there, but and Pinot Gris, but we have done trials and continue to with other grape varieties too. So you don't always completely know off the bat. So there is trial and error, but that's cool climate that we know those varietals work well in. Then in Hawke's Bay, in the Gimlet Gravels, we did take a bit of a bet on this. This land had previously been owned by a cement company which is Dad's background, wanted to mine it for the gravel, these incredibly gravelly soils that are infertile for farming or anything else, but they're great for grapes. Grapes are different to any other, just about any other crop. You want them for wine, you want them to struggle. You're not looking for big, fat, juicy, healthy grapes. You're looking for quite concentrated, small, higher skin content to juice. So it's a different to having an orchard, say, or table grapes. So in the Gimlet Gravels, we planted Chardonnay and the warmer, riper reds, as in Burgundy, Bordeaux style, and Syrahs. Wow. So two very different places, but again, in Gimlet Gravels, we run trials. We've planted some Tempranillo that we're making a blended rosé out of with Merlot and Tempranillo now. So that's an Italian grape variety that loves the dry seasons, which we've had 2 now. So it's not that every year all the fruit will be right for Craggy Range either, and we don't make it if it's not good enough for Craggy Range. We declassify or sell the fruit on, or make a different wine out of it. So we won't release it as Craggy Range if it's not good enough. But we still do trials, and we have another Chardonnay vineyard in Hawke's Bay out by the sea that's beautiful for Chardonnay there, and at our main home of Craggy Range we plant Chardonnay as well. So we have gone to different regions, but whilst it's trial and error, we know what suits the region and the temperature and the climate. Basically, Gimlet Gravels is a warm Mediterranean climate, which is very similar to Bordeaux, and our Martinborough vineyard Tamuna is very similar to Burgundy, basically.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you went from 91 to the meeting with your dad to finding the land, planting the grapes, and then how long does it take the grapes to grow and make your first bottles of wine?
So we bought the land Mum, Dad and I went to Hawke's Bay in 1995 and drove to the top of Tomato Peak and looked down on a piece of land with nothing on, a few sheep on it, and said, that's gorgeous. The home of our yet to be named winery. And Tomato is the extension of a mountain range called Craggy Range. So that name's crystallised. We bought Gimlet Gravels and Tamuna Vineyard, Martinborough, or the farmland, in 96, 97, planted 98, and our first crop was 2001. Wow. Prior to that, we did take over some other vineyards, and just to start in the winemaking process. So our very first vintage was the Sauvignon Blanc and Riesling, which is still a great. Shame we don't have more, but tiny amounts. You start making tiny amounts first. So 2001 was our first proper vintage from Craggy Range, from Gimlet Gravels and Martinborough, but they were tiny amounts. So that's from young fruit, you get very little. From young vines, you get very little fruit, but we were incredibly lucky that the fruit was amazing, and it did really let us know that the Gimlet Gravels had been a great decision, buying this shingle, basically buying a gravel pit.
Yeah, cool.
Doesn't look like a gravel pit now, but you want the vines to struggle. They're inherently lazy, so if they have water, they just go wild and become lacking in concentration of any flavors and characters. And I mean, if you see, that's, I guess, what determines to a very large point the cost of a wine. If it's heavily cropped, or there's a lot of crop left on the vines, it will be a thin, lackluster wine. So that costs a lot less. If you take Sauvignon Blanc for an example, the $5 Sauvignon Blancs that you see that can land in Australia from New Zealand, or even those made in Australia, we couldn't bottle water basically and get it to Australia for that. It's a very different proposition in the winemaking and the viticulture and in the farming.
Yeah. And so Craggy Range is the name, and you spoke before we started the podcast about the labeling, and I know that you studied marketing as well. Can you tell at the reputable, was it Roseworthy in South Australia?
Roseworthy, yes.
And so
never quite finished. I had a daughter instead.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a great job.
No, I did. I was close to finishing.
Yeah. So with your marketing background, how do you go about designing a label? Did you design that yourself, or did you have a major input with the designer? And
we had my mother, but we had a designer, Helen, in New Zealand, a graphic designer. But my mother's attention to detail is extraordinary. So we collected, and they travelled extensively through Champagne and areas as well. So we collected a lot of ideas of what we wanted to do, but we were very determined in that we wouldn't change the label once we'd established it. We would do special releases, or our Prestige has the Mountain Range, but the actual Craggy Range logo we never want to change. So we put a lot of time and energy into that before we ever had wine in a bottle.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful label. It is quite simple, and if you look at it, it's close to a wine glass, and it has Craggy Range in it, and it has the earth, if you look at the dots, and the sky. So terroir, which means what goes into the soil, or what is in the soil, and the sky, and in the glass. So it's very representative, and it's, I think, a very beautiful label, and we never want it to be anything else. We don't want to modernize it, or I did say to you though, as I'm aging, I wouldn't mind if the print of the actual grape variety was a little larger, but we won't.
I think it's glasses. Beautiful. It really stands out when I'm at a bottle shop, and I love it. I think it's a beautiful wine. I've drunk it myself, and I'm sure that my family enjoy it as well, if I recall correctly. So amazing.
And we won't, back to that, we won't release it if it's not good enough for Craggy Range. So it's a stamp of quality. We're ruthless in what we won't put in the bottle.
Yeah, it sounds like that, which is fantastic. So you studied wine marketing, like we said before. Why did you choose to study wine marketing specifically? Did you know that you loved
we wanted to start a winery. This was later in life. No, I didn't start until I was probably 28.
Okay.
So this was once we decided that we wanted to go into the wine business.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I understand. All right. So,
and I had a tutor here too, Tony Harper. So this was before we were actually, as we were just starting with the 1999 release, and before that. So I had a tutor for 2 years, and I was studying wine marketing externally from Roseworthy, which was a brilliant course.
Is there much that you learnt from that course that you've implemented into the business, and what, can you recall anything specifically that you learned, and if it wasn't for that, something would be different with Craggy?
It was as much for me to have the confidence to go face to face with people. So I felt like I couldn't go out even to a bottle shop to see anyone, or if I was going to work in the business, I had to know enough about it. So there's not one true thing. Tony Harper probably more than the course gave me the confidence and taught me how to go out there. I mean, certainly marketing, that just gets ingrained in you, and I came from an events background, so there was a lot of things reinforced. But to have the confidence to do what I do, you can't go in front of a sommelier without having a good knowledge yourself, or you're just thought of as a fool. So it was confidence, I think, is probably the biggest thing I learned from it.
Yeah. So confidence in
backing myself.
Yeah, understanding like what goes on in the winemaking process, and understanding the different varieties of wine, like Sauvignon Blanc versus Chardonnay and things like that. Is that what you're referring to when you
at a very basic level? That yes, it does get more complex. And I did a lot of trade courses too in those days. Distributors run, and hopefully will continue to, some great courses for what they were called working with wine. People, it's knowing what you're talking about, which I guess applies to any business, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course. But I also think that some experience comes out on the job, but it's a fine balance between learning prior and then going out into the world.
Experience comes on the job and evolves over years, and friendships. I mean, one thing with this business that we never could have assumed is the relationships around the world that you develop. You know, you're working in beautiful areas.
Yeah.
We don't.
And restaurants as well,
and beautiful restaurants, and the connections and friendships that we've all made. My parents do an awful lot of traveling with Craggy too when they can. They're at Craggy Range at the moment, and
in isolation at Craggy Range.
In isolation,
what a life.
Which has been a lot stricter than here. It sounds fabulous, but it's been quite isolating because they went into complete lockdown, and they're also older, so they're over 75, so they're still not allowed into anywhere. So it's lifting now. We reopened the restaurant this Thursday, which is exciting with social distancing obviously, but we're coming out the other side, but it has been a challenge. But they normally do a lot of travel with Craggy Range, and in my calendar, as an event like a meeting like this pops up, there's just things every day that I haven't taken out that say I should be in Melbourne right now, and then I should be at Noosa Food and Wine on Friday. And but yes, they generally do a lot of travel for Craggy Range too.
Yeah. I'm sure it gives you a different perspective. This whole COVID has given me a new perspective of life and business and my relationship with friends, family. So it's a blessing in disguise. As restrictive as it is, it's a big learning experience, and technologically we've advanced a lot, so that's fantastic.
I think we'll be doing a lot more Zoom events after this too. You know, that some things will stay where people will realise they don't need to travel as much, or they can work from home.
Yeah, that's true. So as a woman in business, Mary, have you found any challenges that have popped up? Or I get asked this question a lot myself, so I thought I'd pass it on to you. You're actually my first female guest on the show, which I'm super excited about. Finally. Yeah, so have you encountered any specific challenges being a woman in business?
I think I certainly would have if I stayed in my father's business, in his background, and it was just sort of persona non grata then. But the wine industry is different, and I'm amazed. I mean, there are a good amount of women in it, but I'm amazed there aren't more, because it's a very kind industry for the most part. I mean, and certainly the space that we work in, you want to help each other. You want greater good for the region. If one of us is at the London trade show, and we don't have a great variety of, we work with 12 New Zealand family-owned wineries called the Family of 12. But if Felton Road isn't able to be there that day and have a great variety that you know is not immediately competing with ours, I will show that grape and at that wine, and they will too. So it just, being a woman in the wine business, really, I think it's a kind and generous industry. But certainly, you know, any of the others that could have been a possibility in my dad's background would have been horrid,
challenging. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think it would
and
be,
just, I think it's changed now. It's, yeah, that was a long time. Well, I know it's changed now, but it's certainly, I mean, as working in the wine business too, and being a mum, hasn't been as competing as it might sound. And because it's a family business too, I guess the business has been more flexible around me. Certainly being a woman and wanting a family in business does not always augur that well. So I've been very lucky to be a family-owned business too that can fit in with my kids' schedule.
Yeah,
I'm getting to the pointy end now.
Of your family. Yeah.
Yes.
How old's your youngest now?
My youngest is 17, so she's finishing school, and the rest have all long finished. My eldest, who will turn 28, and there's two in between, he's with Hutchinson, back with my husband's company too. So we both come from family business backgrounds. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
No one's interested in the wine business, surprisingly enough. My nephew, my eldest nephew, is back living at Craggy Range full time. He's actually in isolation with mum and dad now. He came out of the Hong Kong market back to living with his grandparents, but he won't be forever. But he's been with Craggy Range, and his background's in marketing too. But he did a 2-year cadetship at the winery after he graduated, and he worked in the Australian market and then Singapore and then Hong Kong. But he's come back to Craggy. He's turning 30 soon. So he's back at Craggy Range full time, which is just wonderful to have a family member there full time.
Do you think that him being a little like a generation younger than you, he brings different insights to the business? And if so, what are they? How does he bring a different perspective in marketing?
Oh, he's a lot more tech savvy than me, that's for sure. And we will always have an external CEO. Somebody will always be a better manager and general manager. So as a family, we can apply to go into any role and encourage, you know, we don't have any winemakers or anything yet, but yes, David's fantastic in marketing and works actually with two beautiful girls in marketing at Craggy Range. So again, a freshness and a lot better ability around things like this, that's for sure.
And so how do you market a wine? So obviously you've got a beautiful label, you've got a quality wine. How do you get yourself out there to make sure people know you exist? Yeah,
we don't advertise anywhere in the world. Certainly, and we don't go after the big prizes, whilst we get many accolades and many very high scores, and we're ranked, in the top wineries of the world. It's not something we seek intentionally. We are about traveling and relationships and supporting our clients. Very different role model even when we started. And there's not that there's one right or wrong, but Cloudy Bay, the likes of Cloudy Bay, you'd have your offering at vintage or at bottling, and you would take that as the client I'm speaking. So say it similar to the Bordeaux style of system of en primeur, you are allocated X amount of wine, and whether you run out of that in 2 months or is up to you. That's what you've chosen to take. And we, from the start, wanted to ensure that if people had put us on their wine list, that they could have stock for the entire year, that they would have that. So we managed that in a different fashion to a lot of the great wines of the world. But for us, that from the beginning too was about relationships and having a consistency for them with our brand. So
and
the travel.
You physically go into restaurants to build the relationships and get the wine into different restaurants.
Yes, and then I wine and dine.
Yeah, fun.
I'm missing that part of work. That's for sure.
Can I join? Come work for you guys.
You're not the first to ask that, Alyse. People who want my job, but it's not just myself. We have a full-time person in London who supports our UK market and European market. My nephew just came back from Hong Kong, but he was full-time Asia supporting our markets there and our distributors. A full-time gentleman in Australia and New Zealand, Mark, who's just now taking over the Asian market, full-time in New Zealand. So wherever we have a strong distribution, and we're in almost 50 countries now, we will have our own person who supports the distributor. Yeah. So whilst we as a family travel a lot, and our winemaker and our general manager, but we also have full-time people in those markets to support the distributors. Distribution is key. If we, as you say, you make the wine, you bottle it, and now how do you sell it? If you don't have good distributors and don't support them well, you won't. You might sell your first allocation to Hong Kong or to London, but it'll sit in a warehouse somewhere and get great accolades, but without supporting them, there's so many great labels around the world. Yeah.
And so you said 50 countries. So what's the future of Craggy? Do you want to get into every country, and how is there a certain caliber of restaurant that you'll go into, or you're not too selective there?
Oh, we certainly want to be in the best restaurants of the world. That was always our mandate, and for our wines to sit comfortably amongst the greats of the world. And we do constantly. We haven't enough lately, but we put ourselves with the staff. We put ourselves amongst just on the table. We'll have great wines from Bordeaux, Burgundy, Alsace, from around the world, Australia, obviously, and many other countries. So it's not that I always think that our Gimlet Gravel Syrah is the best out of the Syrahs that we're tasting, but is comfortable and happy to sit amongst the greats. And we really are applauded as that now too. And often selected to represent the best of New Zealand and sit amongst the greats. So that's been hugely rewarding. But again, back to we need to support the distributor. And going forward, we've doubled our investment in Martinborough now. We have so much faith in the wines of Martinborough. Yeah. So we bought this land. This is a lovely story from a gentleman 2 doors over. It's a large parcel of land, but a 4th generation sheep farmer, John Donald, and we're calling the vineyard the Donald Vineyard in his honour. He has chosen to stay living behind us in the home. He's staying living behind us, and when we go to visit, he'll hop in the 4-wheel drive and come around with us. So we're doubling our holdings there. So we will need future growth, or it's that the demand has outweighed what we can make, and this is an extraordinary parcel of land. So as that comes on, given this COVID situation too, but that's 4 years down. We planted, again, as I said, Alyse, you want the vines to struggle. So where you would think you'd plant distance to give the vine opportunity to grow, we planted them close so that they have to struggle.
Fight against each other a little bit.
And that makes a better quality.
Yeah, beautiful. So you've got another parcel of land, and
Yes.
you're expanding, and your demand exceeds your production, which is fantastic. That's a great problem to have. So how much wine are you making per year at the moment?
We are making not all Craggy Range. With Craggy Range, we're making about 60,000 cases. But as I said, when we declassify all the fruits not good enough, that can go into other blended brands. The next being Wild Rock, and then we will make wines and sell the fruit on. So we actually make over 100,000 cases, but it's not all Craggy Range. But
so is that a lot in wine speak? Is that a lot of cases?
Yeah, it's we would be in the quality of wine, but if you bring Craggy Range back to 60,000, we're a moderate sized producer. But you need scale, and that was Dad's thing. My hobby farm was a flawed concept. Unless you're a mum and dad producer and you do everything yourself, to be a profitable business, which we really are now, you have to have scale. So yes, whilst we're a medium-sized business, for us, we needed that to be successful.
Yeah. And so, how long did it take you to be profitable? And what?
Well, it's not for the faint-hearted, as my dad says. It's a huge outlay of investment, and you
Are we
don't.
talking millions of investment initially?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're talking 60 million.
Okay.
And you can't see anything. You can't see anything. A cash flow for basically 5 years. So it's not for the faint-hearted. But that's the scale. That's the scale we did it on. Within 5-6 years, we were profitable, and now we're reinvesting now. So that changes things for a few years. But we're a very profitable business. And going forward, I mean, that's the thing. My parents have put Craggy Range in a 1,000-year trust, so it's never to be sold. Certainly, I know you can contest that, but they've gone to every length. It's actually most of the world or parts of the world you can do a 500-year trust, but South Australia actually has a trust that's 1,000 years. So the intention is there, and the framework, the bones of the business are just so extraordinary. And going forward, we know the fruit quality, and we know what we're doing. The winemaking team, the sales team, every part of the company. We've got 20 years under our belt now, so we just have such a great framework. And we have a 2-year plan, we have a 5-year plan, we have a 20-year plan, and we have a 1,000-year trust. So there is just such structure around the business. Again, as I said, we've invested heavily again in Martinborough. We're also investing heavily in water. We can't in dams, and we can't assume that water will always be
available.
Given. Yes. Yeah. So we're very long-term thinking. There's nothing that we don't do. We're heading more and more to organics, because we want the ground, and everything we do is sustainable farming. It's not to get 4 good years out of this is a forever option. Yeah. So there's nothing that we do that isn't with long-term thinking. And with our distribution too, we won't go into places, and we've been very lucky not to be heavily tied to China, because it just, apart from the very top echelon,
China
isn't
loves
a market.
Australian New Zealand wines.
Yes, but it just wasn't a market for us with the premium end, and there are a lot that have been caught there, and more so Australian than New Zealand. But it just wasn't. We've gone into China, but it was just never the right place to put a whole lot of work into, and it will be one day, but it hasn't been yet. So
you don't think there's a top echelon of restaurants there enough to explore that?
There is, and we have been there, but there's nobody traveling there now, Alyse, so they're not selling any. Yeah, so the wine that's there, and the producers that count on selling there will have to find somewhere else for the wines.
The 1,000-year legacy that you guys have planned out, was that inspired by the Rockefeller family, or was that something that you guys just came up with?
The Rothschilds.
Oh, the
no,
Rothschilds.
That really, not to my knowledge. I think that was Mum and Dad wanting to know that all the work that we have done will be there forever.
Yeah.
And again, back to that
inspiring
framework
for you to have that.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing because it just, there's no, and for our staff too, for the entire team, everybody knows that we're not in this to cut any corners, or there's no short term, you must do this by this date. We are here forever. And we've been really lucky in this time too. We've managed to keep all our staff on full time.
Awesome.
Around the hospitality too, while we're fully closed. We have the accommodation now is amongst cottages and lodges at 21 rooms, and the restaurant and cellar door, and then the winemaking team. We've been able to keep everyone on because people from the office too have been happy to go out and pick grapes and, you know, stay within their bubble, as it's been called in New Zealand. But the teamwork that we have is amazing, and again, it's because they know we're here forever. You know, it's,
and that must be incredible for them too, to experience different facets of the business now. Obviously unintentional, but if I was working in office constantly, and then all of a sudden I was picking grapes, I've learned so much more about the business and probably appreciate it more. So that's just a beautiful.
Absolutely. And we've always run a very small program where at the winery site where the office is too, that the office staff have had their own little parcel to tend through the year. So we've always done that on a much smaller scale than what we've done during COVID, certainly. But they've been thrilled. Get away from your desk and go out in some fresh air. So we've managed to make it work, which it's been a challenging time though for so many businesses.
Yeah, of course. So when you are traveling a lot, Mary-Jeanne, what are your tips for overcoming jet lag and also keeping fresh and on the go? I know
I'm a big
meditation.
Meditation, but I'm a big, and we're a family of travel on only. We will not check in bags.
Okay.
So that there's 45 minutes out of your life that you'll never get back, standing around the carousel each time you fly at the other end, wondering if you will actually get your bag. So I'm and I do have to dress for work too. So I take something to exercise in, and basically two versions of an outfit and a pair of heels. It's shoes that kill you. So I'm a big believer in carry on only, and actually my husband forced me to the first few times, and I was like, oh, you Nazi. But once I got my head around it, it's a really good way to travel. I do always have a couple of champagnes on board, and I know they say all Craggy Range if the airlines have been fantastic customers of ours too, the top ones. So I do. And I know I do drink a lot of water, but I will always have a couple. I call it my sleeping tablet. Couple.
You think it helps?
Craggy. I think it helps. Helps me.
Helps you sleep, or helps you on the other end?
I'll have champagne. Yeah, it's my sleeping tablet.
Oh, nice.
And I'm not, Alyse, I suffer motion sickness, so I'm actually not a great traveller at all. And through this COVID thing, I keep saying to people I haven't been motion sick in months. So it's a payoff of the travel, but I do suffer motion sickness. So I take a Finnegan the night before I'm going to travel, which they say does help. So who knows?
Yeah.
Probably all in my head.
Okay, there's some great hacks there. And do you meditate as well?
I do, and I do I'll do a replay on my phone and just hope it puts me to sleep. When it says do not sleep, I'm like, let me sleep. My husband Scott and I did a retreat in the Himalayas, as the Indians call it, years ago, on meditation and on sleep. He's not a great sleeper. I'm actually a much better sleeper, and I love yoga too. But learning to meditate, it was certainly a great thing to do. It's hard to stay in the zone at times, but I play that on loop in my phones, and I use block out headphones, noise cancelling headphones, and just have that play on repeat. So I tend to sleep on planes.
Yeah.
So long ago, I can't remember.
I've actually never been on a long haul flight. I've never been out of Southeast Asia. So
haven't you?
No, the longest flight I did was we're meant to go to America this year, but that's cancelled. That's okay. Beautiful. That's okay. So as a woman to woman chat, what advice do you have for other women in business who might be starting on their own without the family backing? What advice do you have to women who, in any industry, obviously,
yes. I mean, it's probably not the right time to do things now, but certainly you don't have to assume you'll only be one thing or do one thing. Sounds so cliche. You have to do something you enjoy.
Yeah.
Learn what you want to learn, what you're delving into. Learn. Well, for me, getting educated before and having the practice, and I used to be terrified of public speaking. So it's practice, but also just do enough things that give you the confidence to know you'll be okay, that you won't embarrass yourself first of all, that even if you stuff up or make mistakes, that you've done enough work in the area that you're wanting to go into, that you can't just be a complete embarrassment to yourself.
Yeah.
Just don't. And my daughter, I have 3 sons and a daughter, she doesn't know what she wants to do. And it's like, well, you have to start something and you can keep changing. Nothing's permanent, but I think changing jobs at the moment is probably a bit
risky,
unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
I've changed jobs and worked in many different industries. I had a lot of experience in hospitality, and loved it just for that people to people contact, and it's just a fun industry, hospitality. It's crazy at times, but it's just so much fun. And then
it's the best of people too.
Yeah.
Sorry, but then what?
Then I've worked in business development and marketing, and just various, and public relations. So getting a taste of different things, and now I know what I love and what I like to do. So I think it's important to go out there and explore, especially whilst you're young, and not be afraid to, as a woman, to try and figure it out that way.
And find platforms for other things within it too. With Craggy Range, I did a fair few charity events before any of this, and then Craggy Range became such a great platform for that too. So you don't know when you're entering into something, where it will take you. So I guess be able to scare yourself, certainly.
Yeah.
Be able to be a bit frightened and not know whether something will come up, but have enough nous or knowledge around what you're entering into, so you won't
go for it.
So you'll just have enough confidence. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, that's great advice. And Mary, I like to switch the interview around for one question, and I get you to ask me a question. It can be anything about wine, or about hospitality, or about my podcast. What's a question that you have for me?
Okay, so when you go to the bottle store, I don't want to get to you said you don't have a great knowledge, but you know what you enjoy.
Okay.
When you go to the bottle, if you're looking for a wine, what are you attracted to? What would draw you in?
Well, I love a quality. I like a lighter wine, so Pinot Noir or Sauvignon Blanc, sometimes Riesling, and I love looking for a nice label, and also I look for the region. I love wines from New Zealand and South Australia, the colder regions. And then in terms of a label, it sounds lame, but I look at wines that look good in on the label. So just a clean, classy,
it's a tactile
label. Yeah, and then I also really like them if they feel good. So sometimes they have that raised, shiny.
Yes.
Print to them. I think yours might have it. I can't recall.
Yes, it does. It does. Yeah.
And
it's a nice feel, isn't it?
Yeah. So classy. Yours looks quite classy. Sometimes I like the funky labels, but anything too crazy isn't really for me unless I've tried it and I know that it's a good wine. So there's some wines.
What are you missing most in COVID?
I'd say travel. I'm loving being at home, but I really miss travel interstate and internationally, and we were really excited to have a year of more travel. We didn't do any overseas trips last year, so international travel and those new cultures and experiences. I lived in China for 6 months, so I really loved being in a different country and learning all about just different things and having that contrast. So if I could put it into one word, it would be contrast. Because we're doing the same thing every day, and we're staying indoors and going to the same restaurants that we know are open. There's not a lot of contrast, and I think meeting new people, actually, it's another thing I really miss. Obviously, I'm doing a little bit of it through the podcast, but contrast gives you new perspectives, and it's challenges my belief systems, and I really like that. It helps me learn. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mary-Jeanne, what is your legacy to the world? What do you personally want to leave after you're gone?
Oh, certainly Craggy Range in good shape.
Yeah.
Which again, as I said, we'll always have external CEOs and general managers, so we can't stuff it up. Happy, healthy children. Gosh, what else don't we want? Yeah, that's and it's been challenging times for my bigger ones. Terence, my second son, has a development in Fortitude Valley, and he's taken over the cleaning contract. You know, that they're adaptable. What I'd like to see leaving is the kids having a consolidation around what's important to them.
Yeah.
How much do you need? How big does something have to be? And about finding a balance. So there's been some light bulb moments during this time, certainly, but for myself, happy, healthy family.
Oh, that's
Absolutely
beautiful. Well, I wish you all the best with Craggy Range and with raising
Thanks,
a beautiful
Alyse.
family. You seem to be doing an amazing job. 4 kids and a winery in your lifetime already has just blown me away, really, from one woman to another. Keep up the beautiful work with what you're doing. I see you on social media doing lots of amazing things, even during COVID. So I think it's lovely what you're doing with your family and supporting all the restaurants and businesses that you and clients that you have. So it's been wonderful having you on the podcast, Mary. Thank you so much for your time. Look forward to meeting you.
Thanks for having me, Alyse. Yeah, see you when this is all over.
Yeah,
thanks very much.
Thank you.